In this video, I'll be explaining how the mind affects the body, or how you can take advantage of certain knowledge to make changes in your overall life and well-being. For those of you who don't know me, my story became quite popular back in the day, mainly for overcoming neurological conditions and disabilities. And in more recent years, I've been a bit more open about achieving great outcomes when it comes to people's health, and in my own life as well. For example, in a previous video, I mentioned how I was always sick with either a cold or a flu. Like back in the day, there was always something wrong with me, at least 70% of the time. 70% of the time, I was always, going through a bug, like whether it was a cold, whether it was a flu. However, discovering this sort of information, I then ended up going about 13 years without being sick. So 13 years of no cold, no flu, nothing wrong with me. And that came to an end last September. But that's only because I wasn't looking after my mind in that week. And I'm very glad that finally this sort of knowledge is becoming more popular and mainstream. To understand how your mind affects your body, it is important to know and understand the central nervous system. Your central nervous system is a processing center that manages everything your body does, from your thoughts, your feelings, and your movements. Your brain and spinal cord take in and send out information to your entire body. So many people know and understand the placebo effect. This is a prime example of how the mind affects the body. For example, believing that a treatment will work can actually trigger real healing, combining expectation and relief to produce physical results. We also know that anxiety and a negative focus can make the brain amplify physical pain. We also know that positive thinking encourages positive choices. Or in other words, what if this placebo effect was just the effect? What if your level of consciousness was the most potent factor in the equation? So what would you use this power for? Let's dive into it. The awareness that emotions, feelings, and the power of thought have a direct effect on our physical health is becoming more mainstream. This is shown in the field of science known as psychoneuroimmunology, which focuses on how the mind affects physiology. Psychoneuroimmunology is a discipline which focuses on the central nervous system, the neuroendocrine system, and the immune system, and their relationships. Again, so mainstream society has to put everything in categories. However, everything actually works together. The central nervous system is a huge collection of connections throughout the body, incorporating parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. It allows the brain to send information throughout the body using chemicals. So, what has now become clear is that the central nervous system also controls the body's defense mechanisms. Knowing what I have just mentioned, we can comfortably assume that perceptions, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, or even ideas have neurochemical consequences. Thoughts and emotions trigger chemical signals, like hormones and neurotransmitters, that directly alter heart rate, digestion, immune function, and pain levels. So how the mind affects the body follows a certain flow which goes thought to chemical to protein. Neuropeptides, or the chemical messengers of the body, were once thought to be only in the brain. Pioneering research from Candice Pert has now revealed that they are present on both the cell walls of the brain and in the immune system. As these complex messengers travel throughout the body, they provide vital information and sometimes almost instant physical feedback. For example, adrenaline when in an emergency. There are many different ways to communicate the idea of how a thought can trigger a chemical and physical effect. For example, if you see someone you hate, or if you see your wife naked, or if you look at HeartMath Institute's research on when people signal brain and heart coherence, or practicing heart coherence meditations. Information can be transmitted from thought to physiology. Research has indicated that an inextricable link exists between our emotions, both good or bad, and the regulatory systems of the neuroendocrine and immune systems through the central nervous system. Mainstream science also acknowledges stress as being responsible for most illnesses and diseases. I would highly recommend you read Dr. Joe Dispenza's book called You Are the Placebo, as it mentions multiple studies on this sort of phenomena, and the results are always consistent with people's thoughts, either good or bad, affecting outcomes in their biology. Now, there is a difference from mainstream and mass level of thinking compared to what is, let's just say, more beneficial in terms of producing results and outcomes for individuals when it comes to their health. To give you an idea, Dr. Joe Dispenza has thousands and thousands and thousands of case studies of people overcoming impossible conditions. Like the doctor said it was impossible, and the person, after doing certain work, such as meditation or changing their lifestyle, has then ended up overcoming conditions, getting out of a wheelchair, overcoming chronic health conditions, overcoming multiple diagnoses, and then a mainstream person would look at that result. They would look at someone overcoming an illness, overcoming a lifelong health condition, and then they would say something like, "But Dr. Joe Dispenza is not a real doctor." And this is kind of where society is right now. At least the masses, in terms of how they are taught to think. It's like me looking at Lionel Messi and seeing all of hundreds and hundreds of goals and saying, "But he doesn't have a PhD in football." This is how ridiculous mainstream society is starting to sound. So when people look at people such as Dr. Joe Dispenza and similar, for example, I know, for me, I've trained with many yogis who can sort of correct a physiological condition almost instantaneously when working with someone, and the mainstreamer would look at that and say, "Oh, they're not a doctor." But where I'm coming from is just asking, can we just look at the results and the outcomes? Or can we ignore everything and let's just ask ourselves, what produces the best overall long-term holistic success? This is what it means to operate on a different paradigm. Now, doctors are highly skilled individuals. They have good intentions. They got into a profession which is highly trained and takes care of you when things go wrong. Most doctors study illness. They do not study prevention. It is not their job. Most mainstream professions are not taught how reality or things come into being. They are taught how to deal with effects rather than the cause. I've said in many of my lectures and videos that the scientist measures reality. An alchemist will ask you, what reality do you want? And let's create it. The scientist measures a reality. The alchemist gives you a reality so that you can then measure it and make sense of it. Most mainstream professions or most mainstream experts are not trained to know and understand the nature of reality and how things come into being. No formal education is trained to do so. This is education you must receive yourself outside of mainstream parameters, outside of mainstream society. Because mainstream society is built around a system which keeps people uninformed, misinformed, selectively informed, which is why mainstream society, unfortunately, is often ignorant, sick, weak, and uninformed about what is possible. With most mental or physical conditions or suffering, it can all be put into three main categories: environment, genes, and mind. Like the environment, for example, dangers, or if the main cause of illness was exposure to toxins, in most cases the body would need to be cleared up, detoxed, and healed. So the main causes of most illnesses, suffering, diseases, and conditions is the environment, genes, and mind. Well, realistically, again, all things work together. They aren't really separate. Environment signals the gene. However, the main point of control and power or empowerment is the mind. This is where we have the most control or say over our circumstances. HeartMath did an experiment. Does thought affect the gene? Or does thought affect DNA? When they combined thought and emotion together, the DNA changed. In the case of environmental diseases, you change the environment, or if a cell isn't thriving, you don't change the cell, you change the environment, and then the cell thrives. In the case of bad genes, those two can be changed, at least the expression of the genes. For example, when I tore my ligaments, or when I tore my knee ligaments, I shouldn't have been able to go back to life and do my squats like within a few days. But because I have different knowledge, I was able to be pain-free in just about a week. So the mind affects the body. Different levels of knowledge in themselves lead to different results. For example, if I have a group of students and they were about to submerge themselves into cold water, and I told one group of students, when you dive into the water, you'll get a shock response, and if that doesn't kill you, the hypothermia will kill you. And if I took another group of students and I told them, submerging yourself in cold water is very good for you. It boosts your immune system, it helps you recover your muscles, increases your dopamine, and I gave them all of these health benefits of submerging yourself into cold water, and I told them how to breathe through it. You would get two completely different outcomes, and the only difference is what they were taught before they went into the experience. Do you see how just what thoughts, what ideas, what beliefs, what you teach people can affect the reality? So, I hope you enjoyed this. This was just a quick video on how the mind affects the body. You are a sum total of your hereditary and your environment. However, your point of power is your level of consciousness. Feel free to ask me anything in the comments, and I'll be hopefully sharing more of what I've been up to over the years and what I have seen change in people's lives.
The results were almost immediate. I felt them by the end of the treatment. I knew something had happened in my body, that something had shifted. I went into the treatment with a heavy pressure on my chest and shallow breathing, and by the end, the pressure had completely lifted off my chest and my breathing was much more fluid, and it has stayed that way since the treatment.
The fact that I've done it now, I feel like I have the confidence to know that, my brain is capable of a lot, that I'm capable of a lot, and I'll have a lot of confidence to try and do more things going forward. If I had that kind of confidence to tackle anything and everything and in the back of my head that I can accomplish anything 10 years ago, I don't know where I would be now.
I was really scared, and I'm here today after 25 years and looking so many different places and seeking so many solutions.
And instead of taking other routes, getting shady medication prescribed to you, I wanted to kind of take the harder route, or the more permanent route.
I want to tell a little bit about an experience that I had with Shami, talking to him about a little bit of a problem that I have of like when I have my thoughts, and sometimes it's not easy for me to articulate and verbalize what I'm thinking. And yesterday I had the opportunity to do this healing session with him. That was amazing. That after, I can't tell exactly what happened, but it was like I was in a different reality. So now I can really speak my thoughts in a much clearer and concise way as well. So I'm very thankful for that.
My mood has also significantly improved, and it has stayed up there. And the following 3 days after the treatment, I still felt it working on me. And I woke up one morning and I noticed I hadn't been grinding or clenching my teeth, which is, I had been doing that for quite some time before it. So that was a nice surprise as well.
A lot less fidgety. Like if I was sitting here 3 months ago before I did the training, I'd be kind of playing with the table. I would be looking out the window every 5 seconds. I don't do that anymore, so that's definitely a good sign.
How would you explain the feeling before and after Qigong?
So when I would do Qigong, it was at the end of my day, around 7 p.m. I had a full work day. I'd had about an hour of brain training under my belt, so I was completely exhausted. But when I would do the Qigong, it completely renews you. It completely resets you. It makes you feel like you just woke up after 9 hours of sleep. So it's definitely something that I've kind of tried to implement in my day here and there. It just completely resets your mind and your nervous system, and definitely something I would recommend. If I did this 10 years ago, I probably would have felt on top of the world. Probably would have had a bit of a superiority complex, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, I don't regret not doing it 10 years ago. I feel great. But